How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Infinite Sports. I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder. Hope everybody had a very good weekend, especially if you were a New York Knicks fan. We're going to talk about that. We'll lead that off in the show today. We'll talk about the Yankees and how they did over the weekend, polar opposite of what the Knicks did to the Sixers. The Yankees got swept by the Brewers, so is there some pause to be concerned with the team? We'll get into that. We'll talk a little bit about the NFL, a couple things I wanted to get into, some Aaron Rodgers stuff, as well as talking about when the Giants are going to be kicking off their season. It will be Sunday night against the Dallas-Cowboys, which is kind of familiar because remember when they did that a couple of years ago? What happened to them? So we'll get into that as well. So let's get into talking about the Knicks. I mean, they just continue their dominance. They've now won, 7 straight games here in these playoffs. And once again, similar to what they did to the Hawks in the first round, I mean, this game 4 against the Sixers in Philly was non-competitive. The Knicks couldn't miss a shot. And they're doing this without OG Anunoby. I mean, again, another great performance. The Sixers just, once they fell behind, that was it. I mean, the game was over. The Knicks shot 11 of 12 from 3 to start the game. Think about that. 11 of 12. They finished going 25 of 44 from 3. They could not miss a shot. And it's just they had everything working. I mean, there was one point during the game in the second half. They had a 5-point swing. I mean, they were obviously up, but this was kind of like, a microcosm of how the game was going for Philly. Brunson hits a layup. Philly immediately turns the ball over. Brunson's standing beyond the three-point line. Pass it to him. Hits the 3. 5-point swing there. I mean, that was kind of what was going on with the Sixers in this game. And then even after the game, well, during the game, first of all, the Sixers and Philly themselves, they were trying to make sure that they didn't have a repeat of what happened a couple years ago in the playoffs where Knicks fans took over Philly. And Embiid was campaigning for the fans to show up to the game so they wouldn't have a repeat of what happened. That just was further from the truth. It did not happen. Did not happen. Then the Knicks took over again. I mean, Deuce McBride, you thought it was a home game. Deuce McBride, every time he took a 3 or any kind of shot, you would hear Deuce. It's clear as day. And then even looking at, some of the local news after the game, I mean, Knicks fans were basically mobbing Philadelphia reporters. Couldn't get a word in. It was a disappointing finish for the Sixers. It really was. And it was good for the Knicks because now you kind of get to rest a little bit while the Pistons and the Cavs are still kind of locked into their series. That's 2-1 right now. James Harden, hit some big shots down the stretch in Game 3 of that series to put the Cavs on the board. So that series, I think that series goes at least 6 games. That's my prediction, but I think the Pistons obviously take care of business, and we're going to see a rematch of round 1 from last year between these two, between the Knicks and the Pistons. And then on the other side, I mean, the Thunder are going to eventually move on. I think they're going to do it in 4 games. I think most of us agree with that. They're going to take care of business with the Lakers and move on. And then the Timberwolves and the Spurs, they're locked into a very good series. Victor Wembanyama got ejected last night for throwing an elbow. Didn't realize he was going to get ejected, but that ended up happening. And Anthony Edwards hit some big shots down the stretch, and Rudy Gobert had a big and one at one point in the fourth quarter, and the Timberwolves tie the series up. So that series I think that series is going to go 7 games. So yeah, the Knicks are the first team in the second round to move on, so they get to rest a little bit and wait and see who they end up playing. And again, it's also good because OG Anunoby is eventually going to come back, and the Knicks are going to need to have everybody healthy for whoever they go up against next, because these are the best teams left in the Eastern Conference, and obviously they struggled with the Pistons earlier this year, going 0-4, and the Pistons are playing really well now, after trailing 3-1 to the Magic. they've kind of turned back into the team that they've been all season long. And the Knicks, if it is the Pistons, they're going to have their hands full, obviously, with Cade Cunningham. So, I'm looking forward to that series if that ends up being the case. I think it is going to be the case, like I said. But the Knicks just, I mean, they have been playing really well. They are playing their best basketball at the right time. And, TNT put up the graphic yesterday. Well, actually, ESPN put up the graphic. Inside the NBA put up the graphic yesterday. So, I mean, the point differential in the two clinching games in the first two rounds here, I mean, the Knicks won by 51 against the Hawks. They scored 140. Then they scored 144 yesterday and won by 30. They shot 13 of 36 from three in the Game 6 clincher against the Hawks. And then they shot 25 of 44, like I said, in the Game 4 clincher to sweep the Sixers. Two highest scoring games in playoff franchise history. I mean, they're setting records, and they're playing the best. They're playing the best brand of basketball that they have all year, and it's perfect timing for that because this is where the money's on the table. This is where all chips are in. So, and I talked about it a lot, a couple times, how there's a lot of pressure on the Knicks to go on another run this year because the changes that they made, that now the expectations that come along with making the Eastern Conference Finals last year for the first time in quite some time. And then letting Tom Thibodeau go and bringing in Mike Brown. Was that going to make a difference? I mean, for some people, they probably thought when there definitely were individuals out there when the Knicks are down 2-1 to the Hawks, you're thinking, oh man, they're going to get upset in the first round, and there's going to be changes. Are they going to let Mike Brown go after one season? But now they look like they have found their footing. They're using Karl Anthony Towns the right way. Got banged up in this game, but of course came back in. Don't want to lose him. Everybody contributed. Again, Deuce McBride stepping into the starting lineup. I mean, he had a very good game. Like I said, you heard the Deuce chants in Philly. I mean, it was like they were playing at the Garden. But yeah, Deuce McBride, 25 points, shot the basketball efficiently, went 7 of 10. Brunson had 22 points. Mikal Bridges, 6 of 10, had 12. Karl Anthony Towns, a double-double, 10 assists. He had 17 points, and Josh Hart also had 17 as well. Landry Shamet contributed off the bench with 12, went 4 for 6 from 3, had a good shooting night. But yeah, they got to take out their starters early and put in the reserves. So again, extra rest for the starters, going into the next series. They got to start their rest, in this game. But yeah, they had above 80 points going into halftime, just like they did in the clincher against the Hawks. Joel Embiid had a good game, 24 points. But, Paul George, only 7 points. I thought Tyrese Maxey was going to have a better series. Didn't have any games where he scored over 30 points. His best game was game 2. He had 26, but that was also because the Sixers had their starters playing the vast majority of the game. 30-plus minutes for everybody. Because, I mean, they were just going for it because, Embiid was out. And they kind of ran out of gas at the end. They really couldn't hit a shot at the end of the game there. So, and the Knicks were able to come back and win. That game was pretty close all the way through, and the Knicks were able to get that done. And then, games 3 and 4. Especially game 4, they dominated. But, game 3, they had to kind of gut it out, but they were able to get the job done. I was out with people on Friday night watching the game. Going out for the game, there was nowhere to park where we were going. There was nowhere to park. I had to park on one of the side streets, but we were able to make it in. We had a reservation, so we were locked in, and the game was on everywhere. There was my one friend was invested in the Buffalo Sabres playoff game against the Canadians. That was on one of the little TVs, but everything else was all Knicks. And rightfully so. We did have the Yankees. They were on a TV that we were able to look at, and they didn't do so well against Jacob Mizorowski, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. But it was a great night, and then they were able to get it done on Mother's Day, and now they await for their next opponent. But I got to tell you, if the Knicks are going to play like this, and I said this after they knocked off the Hawks, I mean, if they're going to play like this, they could beat anybody. Everybody's contributing in the starting lineup. Bridges got off to a rough start, but, he's contributing. They're healthy. That's the biggest thing because, a couple times, over the course of this era of Knicks basketball with Jalen Brunson, a couple years ago, right? Everybody got hurt. People were dropping like flies. OG got hurt. Josh Hart was banged up. Mitchell Robinson got hurt. Like there was Julius Randle was hurt before that. Earlier that season. Last year they were relatively healthy. This year they're relatively healthy. OG had a little bit the hamstring injury. That's not too serious, so he's going to be back at some point, and you're going to need him, especially going up against whatever team they're going up against in the conference finals, and then if they're able to get to the NBA finals, you're going to need all your guys, and it looks like OG is going to come back, and this series allowed them. They got to go game by game, and not rush OG back. I mean, they take a 3-0 lead. You're like, all right, well, now we really don't have to bring him back, unless the series gets dicey. And they didn't have to. The Knicks went for the jugular, and they took care of business. They knocked off the Sixers. And I was wrong about this series. I mean, I had the Knicks winning the series, but I thought this was going to be more of a competitive series. I thought this series had a chance to go the distance because the starting five for the Sixers was healthy, but the Sixers don't really have as deep of a team as the Knicks do. And that really showed. Hence why Embiid's out in Game 2, and they just had their starters playing for the majority of the game, taking up a lot of minutes to try to at least steal a game from the Garden going back to Philly. And then these last 2 games, I mean, the Knicks, their perseverance and then just their pure domination of the Sixers in Game 4, they got it done. They look really good, and they're a dangerous team, and they can beat anybody. They can beat anybody. It's going to be tough. It gets tougher as you progress through these playoffs, but I think they could do it. I think they have a good shot. Depending on who they end up going against, whether it's the Cavs or the Pistons. And listen, I was saying it yesterday. Last year you had the Pacers going up against the Thunder, right? The Pacers were able to push the Thunder to 7 games. Okay? If the Knicks are going up against the Thunder or whoever, they can hang with these teams in the Western Conference. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm picking them right here, right now to win the NBA championship. But they can do it. They have the team to do it. Now they have to just go out there and execute. And I think they can do that. And especially because of how they're playing and the contributions that they're getting from certain players that maybe they weren't necessarily doing their job early on, like Mikal Bridges. But it's all coming together. And especially when you're at this point in the postseason, you want that. Now, I know there's probably going to be, people out there that maybe view this bit of resting period here that they have as maybe being a bit of a disadvantage because the Knicks are in such a rhythm right now. But I think they'll be okay. And when they're ready to go, whoever they're playing against, they're going to be up for the challenge. So, really pleased with how the Knicks are playing. And it gets tougher as you move along here. But they're going to be ready for this. They're going to be ready for whoever they go up against. And whoever it is in the conference finals, and if they're able to get past that, it's going to be a good series. I think if you were to ask me who I think would be better for them, it's probably you would say it's the Cavs because you get the home field advantage. With the Pistons, you're not going to get that. And the Pistons are playing really well right now. But it's going to be the Pistons. It's going to be the Pistons. And I went to my first NBA game last year. I went to game 2 of the round 1 matchup, and they lost. So, we will see. We'll see. It's going to be fun down the stretch here as we move along in these NBA playoffs. But the playoffs have been very good, and it's only going to get better. It's only going to get better. But like I was saying with Ben last week when we had him on the show, and we're going to try to have him on the show again this week. If the Knicks do go on and they win a championship, if hypothetically they win the NBA Finals and it's at Madison Square Garden, I am perfectly okay with just watching it from the comforts of my own home because it would be mayhem if that happens. But don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because, again, got to get there first, and you got to win it. So that's what's going on in Knickland. A very, very good weekend for the Knicks. They sweep the series in Philly. Philly's got to pick up the pieces now. Move on to the Phillies who are playing better baseball as of late, and then the Eagles obviously we'll talk about them more. With the schedule coming out actually this week, and when we get closer to football season, when football's about to start. But let's get into talking about the Yankees. So the Yankees have gotten off to a very good start this year. Not too many complaints, but this was a tough weekend. This was a tough weekend for the Yankees. They get swept in Milwaukee against the Brewers. They get walked off a couple times. The first game they had no chance against Jacob Mizorowski. He had everything working. I mean, he was just blowing hitters away. I mean, Spencer Jones made his major league debut, so that was the corresponding move with Dominguez going on the IL. So we got to see Spencer Jones did pick up an RBI single yesterday, and to put the Yankees up 2-0 at one point. But yeah, Mizorowski immediately. Spencer Jones is met by Mizorowski's 104 mile an hour pitches, and he did foul off one on the first at bat, but eventually struck out. Not too many people like Spencer Jones' stance. I think that's something that he's going to have to adjust again, and he's going to have to adjust to major league pitching. But it did make a good play out in center field. He's definitely going to get some runway out there. He's playing right field yesterday, I believe. So, he's going to get his opportunities now with Stanton on the shelf and now Dominguez being out as well. It's going to be a little bit before he gets back. But he not the best weekend for him. Again, he's just getting his feet wet in the majors, and you hope that you start to see the power numbers go up and get his first home run off the board. And actually, he did come up with the bases loaded in this series, and you thought maybe that this was going to be a chance to show some magic, but it didn't materialize that way. The Yankees really just didn't hit in this series. They struck out a lot, which is, if there's any concerns that I have with this team, it's the fact that they struck out over 30 times in these 3 games. They struck out 29 times in 2 games, the first 2 games of the series. That's not good. And that's something that's kind of been a problem for the Yankees in this era, is just too many strikeouts. And especially, again, 29 strikeouts in 2 games, 15 in one and 14 in the next game, or vice versa. Not good. That's a problem. And they left a ton of guys on base in this series, and that hurt them. You had the bases loaded with nobody out in this series, and you only were able to get across 1 run. The second game, you're up 2-0, and you're only up 2-0 because of Paul Goldschmidt leading off the game with the home run and then tacking on another run later in the game. And then the Brewers are eventually able to get to the bullpen. Camilo Doval came in the second game in the 8th inning and, gets the first 2 outs, but then a couple of singles and a stolen base or a pass ball, and all of a sudden, Contreras singles and the game is tied. And then you eventually lose an extra innings in the second game because, the mental errors and not good moments in that 10th inning, because you had Tim Hill throwing to third base when he should have took the easy out at first, and you would have had 2 outs, and then they got a fly ball. Contreras flew out, and that would have been the third out of the inning. But instead, you throw to third base, and you hit Rengifo in the face, and then Contreras flies out. But then earlier in the inning, you had Fernando Cruz throwing a wild pitch, and that allowed the ghost runner to go to third base, and then Caballero can't field the ball cleanly. That leads to the game-tying run, and then, like I said, you had what happened with Tim Hill. Tries to throw to third base, be aggressive, and I thought initially he was going to go to second because maybe they had a chance at the double play. But even if that wasn't the case, you're either throwing to second or first. You're not throwing to third base. But he threw to third base, and it didn't work out. And then the Yankees ended up losing that game. But also, I mean, Camilo Doval, it doesn't look like it's going to work out. You know, he's too erratic when he's with his command. And on top of that, he gives up hits, you know, back-to-back hits to tie the game. So it doesn't look like it's working out for him. If there's one thing you look at the Yankees team, I mean, again, we talked about the strikeouts, but when you look at what the Yankees are going to have to address at the deadline, maybe they go out and get a bat. I think getting a righty catcher should be on the table because having two lefty catchers, there's got to be some kind of balance there. And Austin Wells just not producing. It's not producing. And not to say that Ascara is doing much better, but Austin Wells has been a huge disappointment. Last year, everyone was looking at him as a guy that was going to have a big year. Didn't happen. And this year, I mean, it's even worse. He's got 3 home runs and 5 ribbies. And we're almost midway through May. He's kind of the final piece that needs to get it going because Ryan McMahon had that big hit in extra innings. You know, he's gotten it going offensively, which is great. You know, Jazz has kind of been up and down. He had the game-tying double yesterday. But, you know, he's kind of been hot and cold. Cody Bellinger's looked great. Ben Rice went hitless in the series against the Brewers. So you kind of figure he's going to get it back. He's going to get it going again and get back into, you know, his rhythm that he was in. Judge, you know, hasn't gotten off to this historically great start like we saw last year. I mean, he was batting over 400 for like a month. But, you know, Judge is having a very good year. You know, he's going to get to 20 home runs, I think, before the end of May. Again, homered on Mother's Day to get things started off. Carlos Rodon also, you know, made his season debut, and he was doing pretty good early, but then, you know, got himself into some trouble, a couple of walks, a hit batsman, and then, you know, the Brewers put up a 3-spot, and the Yankees were down just like that. And then they tied the game, like I said, with the Jazz double, and then Bryce Terang homered off of Bednar in the bottom of the 9th inning. And I was saying, could Bryce Terang, couldn't he have done that for Team USA in the World Baseball Classic? They kind of needed that. Didn't need that yesterday, but that's what happened. And they got swept. But I will say it's payback for what the Yankees did to the Brewers in the opening series last year. I mean, the Yankees just beat them up. And that was the whole torpedo bat thing. Everyone's like, oh, the Yankees are cheating. They're using these different bats. What is going on? You know, the Yankees are putting up double-digit runs almost every game, except for the opener with when it was Freddie Peralta against Rodon. But, yeah, Brewers got good pitching. And you saw that firsthand with Mizorowski. I mean, he just had his way with Yankee hitters. They just could not get really anything going. And then, you know, late in games, you know, the bullpen did their job, and the Yankees' inability to win in extra innings, you know, reared its ugly head. They do very well at home in extra innings, but they don't do well on the road. They're the worst in the majors since the Ghost Runner was enacted on the road. They just cannot win in extra innings on the road. Can't do it. And this was a game that the second game, this was a game they took the lead. But you got to get that second run. All right, the first run is kind of a gimme, but you got to get that second run, and they weren't able to do that. They were not able to do that, and they got swept. So now there's kind of that narrative, because right now they're 1-9 against teams that are over 500. The A's, they've gotten off to a really good start, the A's. The Rays, they got swept in Tampa, and now they just got swept by the Brewers. So now does that mean the Yankees, they can't beat the good teams? It is a small sample size, but it is concerning because the Yankees have kind of puffed out their chest a little bit. With some of the divisional opponents they've gone up against. Whether it's the Red Sox or the Orioles. Took a series from the Rangers. Right. I mean, the Yankees could have won the second and third game of the series against the Brewers. They were close games. They lost in extras, and they lost at the bottom of the ninth inning. They had their chances to win those games. They left too many guys on base. They wasted a good start from Cam Schlittler in the second game, and he also took a comebacker, and I was nervous that they were going to take him out of the game, but they didn't. He stayed in. Going to be seeing Schlittler on Friday. Cam Schlittler against Clay Holmes, first game of the Subway Series. Looking forward to that on Apple TV, of course. So I won't have to worry about that, but I'm excited for that. First game of the year but it'll be at Citi Field, of course. But looking forward to that. They got a good performance out of him, but Fried and Rodon struggled. Rodon's going to get it going. The velocity was there. It's his first game back. I think he's going to settle in. He'll be fine. Fried, at last couple of starts hasn't been sharp, but it's a long season. You'll figure he'll get it going again. And then Garrett Cole's going to be on the way back soon. So I cannot wait to see him pitch. It's been a long time. But yeah, look, the Yankees, the narrative, they can't beat the good teams. Let's settle down a little bit. All right. It's a long season. They got very good starting pitching. They left too many guys on base. They struck out a lot. But they're going to beat good teams. They're going to beat good teams. And right now, it's, the American League is not that great. All right, right now it's between them and the Rays for the best record in the American League. So I guess the Rays are taking the place of the Blue Jays this year as of right now. I'm not going to start sounding the alarms just yet. But you do think about it. Yeah, they struck out a lot. Kind of do that. And 1-9 against over 500 teams. You don't want that to continue, because then a lot of people are going to start jumping off the ship and not taking you seriously. I still think with the Yankees pitching, they can win any game. Their starting pitching is great, but they got to get those timely hits. And, I mean, they did get it in extra innings. They did have the lead. It's just, if Fernando Cruz doesn't have that wild pitch, that pass ball, and Tim Hill throws to the right base, and Caballero makes the right play, the Yankees win that game. And they don't get swept. So there's things that, some mental mistakes that are not going to happen every time. Caballero's been playing a good shortstop. Fernando Cruz is still a reliable reliever, even though he does allow guys to get on base, whether it's, giving up hits or walking people. And Tim Hill's been nothing but spectacular. And he just had a mental mistake. So, again, you would have liked to see the Yankees at least take one game, not get swept. But that didn't happen. So you just got to turn the page, flush it, keep going. That's where I'm at right now. Ask me again in July after they've played some better teams. Ask me in August, and maybe my tune will change depending on the outcome of some other series coming up in the future. But that's really it when it comes to the Yankees. And then a couple of football things before we wrap up here. So Aaron Rodgers was in Pittsburgh, and it looks like he is going to eventually sign with them, which we've been saying all offseason for the most part. I mean, I thought after Mike Tomlin stepped down that was it. But then they brought in McCarthy, and then him and Rodgers were talking, and then he thought, well, he really liked it in Pittsburgh. His teammates are campaigning for him to come back. McCarthy's there now. All signs point to him coming back. But it's been radio silence for the most part. But now his agent, I think, met with the team. There's going to be a deal that is eventually put in place, and he will be back with the Steelers. And I think it makes the most sense. Rodgers, I thought, did a good job last year with the Steelers. I thought he, again, for their standards, He gave them the best quarterback play that they've seen since Big Ben retired, which again, to a lot of people, it's not saying much. But I think especially now when you have these two young quarterbacks in the fold with Will Howard and now they took Drew Aller from Penn State. Again, it's good to have a guy like Aaron Rodgers in that room, to kind of bring these guys along. And Mason Rudolph is also there too, as well, a veteran backup. So, I mean, we'll see. If these guys get a shot, if they end up being, one of them ends up being the long-term answer there, two former Big Ten rivals going at it with Aller and Will Howard, we'll see. But Rodgers, I think if he comes back with McCarthy, have now a better offensive system in place, another year for the offensive line to grow and the moves they made this offseason. Look, I think the Steelers are going to be in the mix, to be a playoff team. Could they win the division again? Sure. But I think they will definitely be in the mix for the playoffs because, McCarthy, all he does is make the playoffs. Did it with Dallas and obviously with Green Bay all those years with Rodgers, and again, I just think the Steelers offensively are going to be better because the receiving core is going to be a little bit deeper. Drafting the receiver from Alabama, you bring in Michael Pittman. Metcalf and Rodgers had a nice connection last year. Pat Freiermuth, again, if anybody from the Steelers is watching this, get Pat Freiermuth the ball. Enrico Dowdle had a big year for Carolina last year. He's going to be running the football with Jalen Warren, so that's going to be a nice little combo. And the Steelers' defense, I think, should be good too. So, and they just extended Chris Boswell today, one of the best kickers in the NFL. The Steelers are going to be a good team. Are they going to be, at where Buffalo is? And, I mean, listen, the Ravens kind of took a step back, but, Buffalo and Denver now, the Chargers, they beat them up last year. The Chargers, if they're healthy, are going to be a good team too. And they signed David Njoku, which I think was an underrated signing, to bring him in, another big target for Justin Herbert. Like that move. Is Kansas City going to be back? We'll see. I'm not going to count them out, obviously, after a disappointing year. The Patriots, of course, waiting on the A.J. Brown news, when the deal is officially done. So, how are the Bengals going to be? Defense is going to be improved. Burrow hopefully stays healthy. So, there are a lot of teams you look at. The Texans, obviously, with their defense. Daniel Jones, if he could stay healthy, can the Colts make the playoffs? The Jaguars. There's a lot of teams that you could talk about. But you know what? The Steelers are going to be in the mix. And with Aaron Rodgers, he's still got the arm strength. He's still got, and the accuracy obviously has dipped over time with, him getting older. But, with the better receiving core, good protection, got a defense that can get stops, better offensive system in place. The Steelers are going to be a better team than they were last year. Now, is that going to mean they're going to win more games? I don't know. I still kind of would have them sitting around that 9-10 win range. But that's just me. So, nothing official yet, but there's definitely movement with Aaron Rodgers, and he's eventually going to sign. And this could be the last hurrah. And then one other thing I wanted to get into was talking about the Giants. So they're going to be opening up the season this year on Sunday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys at MetLife Stadium. And where have we seen that before? Go back to 2023. Opening night against the Dallas Cowboys. Many people pumped up about the Giants and what they could do. They got Darren Waller. They made all these moves. And you thought, all right, Daniel Jones getting paid, Saquon Barkley back. Here we go. This is going to be the Giants' year where they're going to take a big step forward. And I said to my friends, and they could back me up on this because I said it over and over again. I said this game is going to define the kind of season that the Giants are going to have. And what happened? 40-0. 40-0. And I said, yep, they're not going to be a good team. And sure enough, that's what happened. Would they go 6-11? They had that miraculous comeback win against Josh Dobbs and the Cardinals, but that didn't mean anything. And it just got worse and worse and worse. Daniel Jones got hurt again. And then, of course, the year after happened, and we know the rest of that. So now, September 13th, Sunday Night Football. What kind of season are the Giants going to have, depending on the outcome of this game? I think regardless, win or loss. I mean, depends on if they lose. Depends on how the loss is. Like if you're losing 40-0, yeah, could end up having a bad year. But I got to be careful with being optimistic with certain teams like the Giants, and I showed a little bit of optimism for the Jets with the offseason they've had, because you keep getting fooled. More specifically with the Giants. Because the Giants, when you think they're starting to get out of it, they come crashing down again. It happened in 2016, right? They make the playoffs. Then all of a sudden the following offseason, right, they signed Brandon Marshall. And you're thinking, oh, man, they're going to be, people are looking at them as Super Bowl contenders. And they had one of the worst years in franchise history. Then 2022, they beat the Vikings. They win a playoff game. But they get blown out by Philly. And then all of a sudden in the offseason, right, they get Darren Waller. And you're thinking, oh, man, look at the Giants. They're ready to go. And then Dallas blocks a field goal. And then that was the end of it. 6-11 happened. And then 2024 happens. Dable ends up getting let go. After during the year last year, and then that was it. And now it's a new era of Giants football with John Harbaugh in there. I don't expect 40-0. That is not going to happen. But Dallas is going to be good. Dallas is going to be a very good team this year. But the Giants, they're going to be in the mix. They're going to be in the mix with this team. I really do believe that. I think the defense is going to be really good, especially with the pass rush. They've improved in all three phases on their defense. I mean, maybe took a little bit of a step back with the defensive line just because you lost Dexter Lawrence, but they signed a couple of veterans, DJ Reader and Shelby Harris. So they at least filled the holes there. But, you upgraded at linebacker with Reese and with Edmonds. And then, you drafted the corner to improve the secondary. The Giants' defense is going to be good. And then offensively, hopefully Scadaboo is healthy. Hopefully Neighbors is healthy. Give Dart good protection. He's got some more weapons around him. He's got some veteran guys with some young guys as well. Giants are going to be dangerous. So I don't think 40-0 is happening. Now I'm not going to look. It's May 11th. Whenever you're watching this, I'm not going to pick a winner. But it's going to be a competitive. It's going to be a competitive game. It's not going to be 40-0. But looking forward to that. Also, I think people by now are just sick of Giants-Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. Because, in the mid-2010s, you had that. It's just enough. Give it to somebody else. I mean, we had a great opener last year. The Bills comeback against the Ravens, that was a great game. I don't think you're going to get that. But you will get a competitive game. And I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, the rest of the NFL schedule is going to be coming out this week. So looking forward to that. That's always one of the best days of the year. Just, seeing when people are playing and, then you start thinking about fantasy and all that. So I'm excited. But let me know what you guys think about that. But yeah, as always, everybody, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video, to the channel. Make sure to follow us on the social media platforms in the description below. And wherever you get your podcasts, you can follow us as well. Just look up Infinite Sports, and you'll find us there. And as always, everybody, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, signing off. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.